As far as I, 32 female, could remember, I'd always liked a man in uniform. The thought of a suited up man was tantalizing in ways I couldn't explain. Lawrence, 36 male, was a lieutenant general in the army and the love of my life. He was affectionate, mindful, well built, and deep voiced. He commanded the U.S. Army North in a resounding boom, and I saw him as my knight in shining armor. Lawrence and I had been married for 15 years, and I remember it like it was yesterday. He promised me forever. I thought love was the most beautiful thing to exist. If only I knew. As time went by, however, my darling Larry had grown extremely complacent and was not as attentive as he used to be. It was as if he listened with half an ear and the most irritated of looks across his face. In the moments he was home, he barely spoke to me and worked in his garage like a man unhinged. I always asked him what was happening, whether he was okay and how I could help. I did everything in the manual. Cooked fancy meals, bought several sets of lingerie to entice him, offered to massage him, played his favorite songs, and bought tickets to Mets games, his number one team. All through, he looked at me like I was a frozen, bland blob of jelly. I could not even remember the last time he had made love to me. I wondered whether it was because we had never managed to get any kids. One Saturday morning, Lawrence was called to duty to coordinate an aerospace attack against an Asian country. I drove him to the airport to get a plane to Alaska. He was destined for the joint base, Elmendorf-Richardson. There was a coldness in his eyes when he half-heartedly hugged me goodbye. I began to cry. Did he not love me anymore? Right before he left, he started to be harsh and irritable, shouting at the slightest provocation. The few times I tried to FaceTime him, all I saw was a grainy image of a man who looked absolutely bothered. He didn't ever say, "I love you," and always seemed to rush off any communication with me. I felt neglected and unloved. Lawrence was gone for 1 full month. I hoped he was safe on the battlefield and would not be harmed. I got into the habit of lighting incense and some oud to sage the space and summon good energy into our house. I had also grown sending Steve, 24 male, our driver, to fetch any groceries I needed. He was thoughtful in the smallest of ways and sometimes added in a few pints of Ben & Jerry's ice cream. He had observed how distressed I was and did everything he could to ease my distress. He helped me to find an extra maid for our mansion, to find a new gardener, got me a gym membership, and scouted female communities I could plug into and chat about the woes of being a woman. I thought nothing of it and was convinced that Steve was a sweet guy, going above and beyond his call of duty to meet his employer's needs. I even gave him a raise and summoned the sweetest of my smiles, radiating it to him. My Lawrence, was finally back home. He was not the man who left for war. This Larry was scared by the smallest noises, and he guzzled alcohol as if he would find gold at the bottom of the bottle. He could not relax and always watched the TV with a scrunched up face and fisted hands. In the night he twisted and turned, screaming and shaking, shouting phrases like, "He's already dead, Sarge. Can't you see? Blood is oozing out of his head. He fell from one of our jets." The final straw was when I got home from yoga and found Fluffles, our Siamese cat, twisted oddly on the floor next to Lawrence. He looked me dead and said the freaking cat was making too much noise. I was terrified. I convinced Lawrence to let me take him to the hospital by some miracle because he was not okay. He kept saying he was fine. He alternated between repeating that he was a hard man and stating that he was worthless and useless. I sat through the 4-hour drive from New York to Massachusetts with tears in my eyes, mourning the husband I thought I knew. As we drove into McLean Hospital, one of the best psychiatric hospitals in the U.S., I said a silent prayer and hoped things would go well. Lawrence was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder due to the war. Over time, I got cozier with Steve and vented about my husband's woes and how my marriage existed just in name. With the situation turning into Lawrence being admitted into the psychiatric hospital, things worsened, and I began seeing him as a patient to care for, not my husband. My attention and affection towards him dwindled. Steve was already used to seeing me crying each time he drove me home after visiting my husband. It was one of the usual times when he was driving. We passed a dark alley, and I told him to stop the car. I opened my door and went to his seat, where I pleaded with him to touch me, telling him I had not been touched in more than a year while exposing my bosom to him and jutting my chest. I kissed him, and he did not hesitate. He claimed my body, playing it like a musical instrument. It became the norm, and Steve frequently came to satiate my sexual needs, listen to me venting, and shower me with inexpensive but thoughtful gifts that meant more to me than the expensive flowers my husband had delivered to me weekly. I had not realized that Lawrence was recovering from PTSD that fast. He was on his feet before I knew it, and I began to take precautions by limiting time with Steve and keeping my phone under lock and key because he had been discharged from the hospital and was on bed rest at home. Once in a while, however, I would go on random visits to my mother, where Steve and I would take long trips, roll in grassy plains like children, and share intimate moments in hotel rooms. After a little while, I started to have bouts of dizziness and nausea. My monthly flow was delayed, and I was declared 2 months pregnant upon arrival. I sacked Steve as our driver and cut off all contact with him. I immediately started to seduce Lawrence into making love to me. A month later, I took a pregnancy test and showed him I was pregnant. He became very excited and took an indefinite leave from the army to care for our unborn child and me. We owned a few properties, so we still had a steady source of income, even when he wasn't working. I was 8 months pregnant when I saw a picture sent to me in a newspaper with the headline, "I impregnated senior army man's wife," with my picture right underneath it. My husband was furious. I could feel the anger steaming out of his ears. He stood, calmly picked up his government-issue M18, and left the house. He returned hours later in his target practice outfit. I figured he had gone to let off some steam. Lawrence pulled out of the car, saying, "I have always had my suspicions, but having them confirmed, in full view of the world, hurt me more than anything you could do, Maria." I figured it was Steve who leaked the story as revenge for sacking him and ending our affair. I tried to call, text, and even went to his house, to no avail. I asked some of his friends and family, but they, too, knew nothing of his whereabouts. It was as if he had completely fell off the face of the earth. It's 6 months since Steve went missing. The past few months have been a blur. The country's most prominent divorce attorney, Keith McAdams, defended Lawrence in court after I promptly served with divorce papers on the very night that Steve leaked the story to the media. I had no assets, liquid or otherwise. Therefore, I could not afford a lawyer. The state assigned a lawyer to me, so of course I lost the case. I am here, standing over the papers, supposed to write my final signature and make Lawrence my ex-husband. I do not know how I will raise my unborn child and provide for myself. I have nothing to my name, since we did not have a prenup. No house, no car, no job, absolutely nothing. I regret pursuing short-term passion instead of focusing on the long-term fulfillment of my marriage. Story 2. I, 32 female, cheated on my boyfriend, 34 male, and he left and told everyone my personal business. We had lived together for 3 years. I went out drinking with another guy last year, and my boyfriend, Tom, found out about it. I hadn't been cheating at that point, but he viewed it as me setting up cheating for the future and was very upset with me. Our relationship was then strained at that point, but we stayed together. 4 months later, I did end up cheating with the guy I had originally went out with. The affair went on for 2 months, during which time I lied to Tom about my whereabouts. He found out because the other guy's girlfriend, I had thought they were broken up, found out and contacted Tom. He was furious and hurt and moved out. That happened 3 months ago. Since then, he has told all sorts of people that I cheated on him. He told some of my friends, he told my family members. He also told Tom's girlfriend personal things. He sent her texts that I had sent to him when I was lying about my whereabouts. He sent the other guy texts that were between Tom and I during my affair, proving that I had just slept with him. Tom, too. He told my friends about my financial problems, including that I didn't file my taxes last year, and that I'm seriously in debt due to a shopping addiction. I mean, he even told some people what I weigh, and that I deal with binge eating. I've contacted him and told him to stop it. He ignores me. In short, he's become my absolute enemy, and he knows so much more about me that I'm unsure where he'll stop. How do I deal with this? Comments. This sounds like a case of lying in the bed you made for yourself. I'm sorry, but you created this situation. You hurt your boyfriend, and one can hardly fault him for telling people who you really are. The best you can do is keep your head down. Accept that things are going to suck for a while and wait for things to blow over. The more you tell your ex to stop, the less likely it is that he will. Don't give him the satisfaction of knowing that this has an effect on you, and he's more likely to stop. Your ex is justifiably angry and is actually following the advice of many who have been betrayed. He exposed the affair to the other betrayed partner and to your family and friends. You're upset because your image with all these people was forever changed. In other words, you are living with the consequences of your own bad behavior. He's exposed other vulnerabilities that you need to address yourself. There's nothing for you to do but weather it out. He hasn't lied and isn't harassing you. Pretty soon he'll run out of things to tell and move on to more constructive healing for himself. I don't even know what to say. Play shitty games, win shitty prizes. This is one of the many reasons why betraying someone you're intimate with is a terrible idea. You can't do anything now but move on and try and own your actions. He won't face legal repercussions unless he starts flat out stalking you or making up shiz. Feel free to look into a restraining order if you think you can get one.